So this is going to be a step-by-step on how to replace touchscreen on a Lenovo K6 Plus cell phone, also known as the K6 Note in some places. So first thing you do is remove the battery cover. Um, Surprisingly, this was the hardest part of this. I had some trouble removing this. I had to use basically a tool to keep one side open while I pried open the other sides with a different tool. Remember to always use plastic tools for this, as to not damage your cell phone or parts. Also remember to remove the SIM card first. I only remember this after I started, so be careful with that. After you remove the battery cover, get the right tool there, the right screwdriver, and remove those screws. I try to separate the screws in different places they were, so I started putting out the structural screws to the side there. They were black. Rapidly I noticed that the screws were different colors, so I started putting the motherboard screws to the top there, and then I put the back plate screws separate. After I started this process, when I was rebuilding the phone again, I noticed that most of the screws were identical, so basically I just used whatever screw was easiest, but the different colored ones were extremely easy to remember where they were. So after removing the first back plate there, remember to be very careful as to remove all the screws. I tried to remove that flat cable, but I noticed that the bracket wasn't moving, so I found a different screw there that I had forgotten, so I removed that. So I moved on to an easier flat cable, which was these motherboard plate cables. Be very careful when removing the flat cables, they're very delicate. So that was the little antenna cable there that I removed. So I continued to try to remove those little flat cables I left behind. I knew that bracket had to open, but I just couldn't get it to open. So I moved on to the other one on the other side, tried to get that one open. It wouldn't open, and from experience I know you can just slide these out most of the time, the cable, even if the bracket's closed. So I gently tried to do that, first with the screwdriver, then with this other tool that had a round tip on it. Eventually I managed to slide those out, and I figured out that I was trying to open the plastic bracket to the wrong side. That's why it wasn't opening. So after I figured that out, it was very easy to open and remove that little flat cable. That's a fingerprint sensor that I was trying to remove there. It doesn't come off. Remember, these phones are layered, so remember to remove the top layers first. After that, remove the bottom ones. The battery there, I removed eventually. It kind of cut out there, but what I did was I slid that metal tool there under the sticker and removed it. When I tried to remove it from the sticker, it just came onto my hand. After opening this, I found some gunk on the charger, so I sprayed it with a little cleaning agent there. Then I used the hair dryer. I didn't have a heat gun on hand, so the hair dryer did the job. It took about 5 to 10 minutes to remove this using the hair dryer. The hair dryer was blowing the screws everywhere, so I put them away. I also removed the protective film there. So after doing this for about 5 to 10 minutes, eventually I found out that that came off, and started prying the screen. When you start actually prying it, it comes off fairly easily. There's just a little sticker around the edge. So after checking that the new screen was identical, and I checked how the wiring was on the new screen so I wouldn't just rip the old one off and damage something. Again, I sprayed some cleaning agent there on the sticker where it used to be the adhesive to clean that out thoroughly. And compare the screens again. Remove the old screen. just be careful with the little rubber socket you have on the top there. It doesn't come off, the screen doesn't come off unless you remove that. And very gently remove the old screen because the flat cable tends to rip if you just remove it any which way. Once I put the new screen in, I was very careful because I had to refold the flat cables. And again, these cables are very delicate, so be careful when you're putting them in. I use that tool to help me fold it in just the right place and put that little rubber bumper thing back in its place again after passing the flat cable. So I put the bottom board there. I think it's the south bridge because it says SB on the cable. I think I'm pretty sure it says SB on one of those flat cables. Put the motherboard back in, and initially I wanted to test out the screen before gluing it back in. So I just popped the motherboard back into place, put the little flat cables back very carefully. Remember, I had to bend these cables because they don't come bent. So I put the battery back in there, plugged everything back in, and did a screen test on it to see if it boot up. When initially it boot up, I got an error, like the cell phone was in my pocket. There was some sort of protection against inadvertently touching the screen in your pocket. So I thought there was some problem with the flat cables. Later on, I found out that that was just some sort of protection after you put the screen in, and there was no need to worry about it. So after doing a quick touch test of the screen, I again removed everything. There's the error for the touch key. So the screen, the pocket protection thing. So after testing that, after making sure all the connections were correct, I undid everything again to glue the screen back on. So there comes the motherboard. Checked everything. A little more cleaning fluid on the fingerprint sensor. I noticed it was a little cruddy, so wipe that down. Be very careful when you do this not to put your finger over it again. So very carefully remove the rubber bumper there and remove the screen. So gently remove those flat cables. And a little glue there. I know this originally comes with a type of sticker, but I prefer to use this liquid adhesive here, kind of a gel. I found that it adheres better to the surface than the sticker. The sticker tends to come back off if you don't have the proper tools, like in the factory, and the surface isn't 100% new. So after gluing that, putting the glue on there, I just put the boards back on, try to follow the same sequence, being very careful with those flat cables. One thing to note was that bottom board, I really had to screw that in quite a bit more than the other ones to get a proper fit. Little rubber bumper goes back in there. Also make sure those flat cables on the back are well stretched so you can put the board back in. Be very careful when stretching them and bending them to properly put it in. This time I have the little plastic brackets open, so it was easy to slide in. Put the back plate back in there. I didn't put a new adhesive on the sticker on the battery. I didn't think I needed to. So I just left the original one in there. Put all the screws back in. Made sure Put the back plate back in there, the battery case. Be careful with the buttons on the side. And that's about it. Turn it back on and everything's okay. Remember to keep that clamp down until that glue finishes drying off. If you like this video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel to get notified of new videos and content.